Mr. Bison Flips!
Mr. Bison Flips! Mr. Bison Flips! Mr. Bison Flips!
Hello again, Year 12. We're continuing our series on how to structure our HSC essay responses. Today we've come to Module C, and for us that's specifically the text, The Art of Travel, and other texts that deal with people and landscapes. So the structure of the individual evidence clusters in this module should be straightforward. Nothing unusual about how we structure our ideas within the paragraphs. For this, we're simply doing what we do for most other critical essays, which is starting with kind of finding our place in the text. Where is your reference coming from? What is the point being made here about people and landscape? Or about representation, if that's what your essay is about. How does the author present this idea? So what technique has he chosen to use to represent it? And why is this particular technique effective in influencing the reader in a particular way? So that's all familiar, should be comfortable for you, and we should be able to move on to how to structure things to build the complete paragraphs. In a sense, Module C is the most straightforward when it comes to structure of the essay because there isn't really a preferred structure here in terms of what's going to be more effective. You don't need the kind of integration that you would in an area of study essay. You don't need the kind of comparison that you would in a Module A response. And obviously, you're dealing with two texts. So the main thing here is that you get a bit of balance. You probably want to do 60-40 core text and related texts. So really use your related text the way that de Botton uses his guides, which is something that contrasts and further exemplifies the ideas that we see within the core text. And it's up to you whether you do this in subsequent paragraphs or within the paragraphs. So we'll look at what that might look like in terms of the actual essay. So option 1 here is to do comparison in subsequent paragraphs. So then you'd start with an introduction the way you would for other responses, which is first sentence captures the question, second question outlines the keywords in the question into some form of thesis, and then you break that thesis down and you unpack it into your topic sentences. So that should be all familiar. When we get to the body paragraphs, so in this case, if we're using this structure here on the left, the subsequent paragraphs one, you would then start with your first body paragraph, set up your topic sentence, and then present, for example, two evidence clusters from The Art of Travel. So you show here's two examples of whatever your topic sentence has outlined, and then you will conclude that paragraph with some sort of linking phrase. And then you start your second paragraph discussing the related text, and you give two examples from that, which either contrast or further the ideas that you've just presented about people and landscapes, or about representation in The Art of Travel. And then you'd go on again in the third body paragraph to go back to The Art of Travel and show another couple of examples of how your second idea is represented here, and then contrast that in body paragraph 4 with a couple of examples from your related text. So you're weaving between the two texts as you move from one paragraph to the next. If, on the other hand, you want to do your comparison within the paragraphs, then you would start your introduction in the same way, but in body paragraph 1 you would have The Art of Travel and give a couple of examples there, and then contrast or further those ideas with examples from the related text, so within the paragraph. Your second body paragraph would then do the same thing again, give examples from The Art of Travel and correlate that to, for instance, one example from your related text. Obviously, all the numbers here are just indications. Depends how long your pieces of evidence are. It depends, well, on many factors. But in the end, your essay should be balanced roughly 60-40 between Art of Travel and related text. And then your third body paragraph again would have a couple of examples from The Art of Travel to support your topic sentence, and then the related text would be exemplified as a contrast or as a further development of those ideas. Hopefully that makes sense. Should be fairly straightforward in terms of the two methods of structuring these essays. So the reason why this structuring isn't as strict and as difficult as it is maybe for Module A is that in the long run, Module C kind of demands you to have two types of essays. On the one hand, you need essays that are looking at the act of representing and what choices writers do when they represent their position. And on the other hand, you want to have essays that focus on how writers have represented people and landscapes, because the question could come from either of those two angles. Both features will always be there. It's always going to be about people and landscape, and it's always going to be about representation, but the question might emphasize one of those two angles more, and therefore you need to be prepared for two types of essays here. So let's have a quick look at what that might look like. So I've included the two sample paragraphs that I wrote earlier in the term for you here as examples. I'm not going to go through and read them. You can stop the video and look at them if you want to. The main thing here is that you look at the two types of how the balance is shifted between the content, which is the people and landscape, versus the representation, which is the act of how things are written. So in these two body paragraphs, I've used Alain de Botton's text and this artwork on the right from Salvador Dali. And I've been quite sloppy in my research on the Dali artwork. It's purely my observations of it. I might be completely wrong in terms of what it actually means in terms of Dali's art context. So here's the first example. If you look at this sample paragraph, it's more focused on people and landscape and the interaction between people and landscape in the two works, so in The Art of Travel and in Dali's artwork, and how that relationship is conveyed. But it's much more focused on that relationship, and you can see that in the phrases I've tried to underline in this paragraph. Contrastingly, this second paragraph is about the act of representing and representation, and how the text type and the form of the work is much more important. So in this case, you're looking at, if you look at the words I've underlined here and try to emphasize here, it's the fact that it's a non-fiction text and how that's different from the artwork, and how we're trying to distance ourselves and focus on emotion and surrealist painting, etc. So it's more about the form than it is about the people and the landscapes. So hopefully that distinction is kind of clear. And hopefully this video has given you an overview of how to approach Module C in terms of structure, and how the focus really is about having two different types of essay plans, depending on what kind of question you get, and not so much about how to structure the actual evidence clusters. If you've got any questions, obviously email me or come into class with some questions for discussion. See you soon.